welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for Wednesday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday or Tuesday or whenever, because after all, it's your podcast. Joining me today, and I said I'd try and do this in all breath, so here we go. From Metafactory Games, talking about my fantastic factories, I've got Joseph Z Chen. Hey, Joseph.
Hey.
I did that in one
That's
breath. I've actually still got plenty of breath left. I could probably keep talking for a little bit more.
Yeah. One take.
There you go.
Or maybe the 10th take. They
Maybe,
just don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody knows if we edit. You know, we never edit. So it's all good. But thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
it's a
it's
pleasure.
great to be here.
You are in the middle of your Kickstarter campaign for Fantastic Factories, which has only been going really a matter of days.
Yeah,
But
it's 1 day and 3 hours, I guess.
you got a little time.
No one's counting. You know?
It's not like you're sitting at the computer constantly F5ing and waiting to see what's kind of happening. See what's happening next. I guess we better kind of do the admin-y stuff for people who are listening for the first time. Thank you for joining us. If you look in the green room today, we have a range of... We've gone quite healthy, so we've got fruit salad here. We've got some smoothies. We have some oat cakes for somebody who wants to go a bit savoury. And it's all there, so just help yourself. The reason that we do this is because we wholeheartedly believe that there's not enough podcasts out there about board games. And the other reason that we do this is because this is what we call a quick start on the kickstart. And what we do in a quick start on the kickstart is somebody will have a current campaign that's running out there, and we get them on to have a chat so they can tell us a little bit about themselves, a little bit about the hobby and its influences on themselves and how they've influenced the hobby. And then they can talk a little bit about their project. So what we want to do is we want to find out a little bit about your history, Joseph. So we're going to have a stare at the production of the past before we look at the assembly of the present, before we jet off into the dispatch of the future. So do you want to...
Did you write that down? That seems very...
No, it's just off the cuff.
Wow. Well, very impressive. It's, so I got into hobby gaming right after college. Kind of the same way a lot of people do. Just playing Catan, Dominion, Seven Wonders. Kind of had roommates at the time, and it was just something that we ended up doing a lot of. To the point that we were actually quite obsessed with some of these games. And I think for Catan, we actually spent some nights where we would actually just set up the board, and we would analyze, we would discuss. Just this, my friend Danton and I would just talk about where would everyone place their initial settlements, and we would kind of figure out what we would do, and then we would then break it all down and set it all up again with a new board and kind of reanalyze. Anyways, so we kind of
No, you can't. You don't get away with saying that. Then, so was it like chess?
Well, we weren't playing against each other. We were simply like we had different perspectives on what we thought was optimal play, and we would try to kind of give the pros and cons, like, what does this placement do? Like these resources or access to that port or positioning, and kind of like min-maxing what the initial placement would look like. Because it's a pretty big decision in Catan.
Yeah.
You know, possibly one of the most important decisions you can make. So we're just curious about, like, what would the optimal play look like? And I think we were just kind of a little obsessive like that in terms of like how to best play a game. And back then I feel like the cult of the new, that wasn't such a thing. Kickstarter was still kind of like growing in popularity, and it's unimaginable now, but we would play the same game over and over again 10, 20, 30 times.
Did you go as far as notebooks then? Did you actually start to write stuff down?
We did not do notebooks. I think that would require like some actual like organization and effort, I suppose. We were just doing it for fun. So,
I mean, did you come up with kind of like several was there several kind of optimum strategy? Because it's all the thing about Catan. I guess it's always comes down to the dice. Because it's kind of like that's the biggest bugbear with me in Catan. That I've always went, I'm going to start off really, really strongly, and then I'm going to roll absolute garbage every single time I play.
Huge amount of variance. I think that's part of why it appeals to a lot of more casual hobby gamers. You know, there's always a chance. You know, even if you don't play optimally, you don't get the places you want, you still might roll well.
Yeah. So did you continue with that? Did you go into kind of, was Catan kind of like your gateway stuff? Did you continue with the hobby kind of after kind of college? Was that you kind of involved in the hobby, or did you kind of like do what a lot of folk did, which was take a break and then dive back into it at a later time?
A little bit. I think we did start with Catan. We went through kind of the Dominion phase, and then Seven Wonders, and then eventually I ended up kind of my own place.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I think may have backed off of board games a little bit. It was always something that you kind of get together once in a while.
Yeah.
But I can't say I didn't play like every week like I had back then. And then, so this kind of group of friends of about 4 people, we were looking for kind of a new project to tackle. And we were kind of reliving kind of those glory days of like, oh, remember those board games we played, you know. Why don't we try to make one? It seems like it should be something we can do. It's just some pen and paper, cardboard, very doable. So we tried our hand at it, and we kind of brought back a lot of those mechanics from those games that we've enjoyed in the past and tried to roll it all into one perfect game, which, by the way, there's no such thing as a perfect game. But that's something that we didn't quite realize at the time. But anyways, we each actually we decided as a group like what mechanics we wanted in the game, and I guess we did kind of mechanics first driven design. And we said, okay, let's meet back next week. We'll each work on a prototype, and we did that. We came back and we played, and as you can imagine, the prototypes were pretty broken and not great. But the one that I came up with, I felt like it had some legs, so I continued to work on it week over week, and we met every week, and eventually my prototype was the only one we were really playing, and it just kind of one thing led to another. And you know, it's one of those things where you start off with a project, you don't think about where it's going, because the point is just to, you know, participate in this activity with your friends, you know, a group of friends. And we weren't thinking, oh, we'll publish it, we'll bring it to Kickstarter, we'll try to get on retail stores and things like that. And it was just one step at a time. But once we knew that people enjoyed playing the game, and we kind of we're always thinking, what's the next step? What's the next step? And
yeah.
Before you know it, here we are.
It's like when you get people that get a hunk of a shell of a car, and they spend like some people will spend 25 years just tinkering away at the car. And, you know, they'll go into the garage and it'll be something that they'll spend every Sunday doing. And eventually it'll be something that they spend every second Sunday doing. And then eventually there'll be the case of, I really need to get rid of this hunk of junk because nothing's going for it. And then there'll be somebody else that'll do it, and they'll have it up and running within about, you know, a couple of years, and it'll be out in the road, and they'll be racing the thing and everything, you know, kind of everything like that. I think that's the same with board games. I think there's probably, 5% of people that actually take it to some kind of prototype level, and I think there's a vast number of people that have got notebooks and sticky notes and kind of the occasional meeple and dice that they've maybe stolen from a couple of other games. I mean, what's your kind of your collection like? I mean, is there a kind of a specific kind of mechanic? I mean, you mentioned obviously the cult of the shiny and new. So do you keep up with that? Do you have quite an extensive collection yourself in terms of games?
My actual collection is actually pretty small because challenging for me these days to consistently get games to the table. My kid is now a year and a half, and
right, okay.
you know, with a kind of a baby or a toddler, it can be challenging to play board games. And in particular, my wife actually doesn't like board games either, so it's twice as challenging in a way. But you know, so I actually keep a very kind of small, curated, I guess medium kind of size collection of games that I know that I'll be able to get on the table. So it's kind of this mix of like favorite Euro type games, and then actually a lot of party and filler games, because I know those are the kinds that you can bust out a lot more easily.
Yeah.
And I like teaching games to other people. I like being able to play with people that aren't necessarily hobby gamers. But, you know, it's great to be able to go to like a convention where you've got tons of hobby gamers around you. But the thing is, everyone else has huge collections, which is great for me. So I can, when it does come time to, you know, sit down at a table, dedicated night to playing, oftentimes I'll be playing someone else's games.
So how many? Medium-sized collection. Because I was listening. Who was I listening to? I was listening to Polyhedron Collider, who were talking about one of the people from the Secret Cabal podcast, who were saying they had in the region of 850 games, and I just like my jaw just hit the floor when I heard. I just like, well, how could you even do that? But how many games do you have? Is it less than 50?
So the thing about filler games is they're very small. So I think that, you know, quantity wise might not be the best measure. To give you a sense of how many games I have, you know, everyone uses those IKEA shells, right?
Yeah.
The Kallax.
Yeah.
So I have a.
Yeah.
I think this is actually pretty small by most people's standards. I have a 2x4 Kallax, so not even the full one.
Right. Okay.
And all my board games either fit inside or on top of that.
But you said on top, so that suggests it's more. Okay.
Except for Max vs. Minions, all of them can fit inside.
Okay, so
some games just don't fit inside. So yeah, so I think that's a pretty small amount in terms of actual quantity. Maybe 50 might be around that number.
That's actually quite. Yeah, that is a small. I mean, that's
in terms
terrible.
of actual like bigger boxes, like, you know, like a Catan or a Sagrada type, anything with like a, you know, telescoping box. I mean, I've got maybe like 20, maybe. It's hard to say.
That's very well curated then. I bet you've played them all as well, haven't you?
No. Well, here's the thing. You know, designing games now, there is kind of that cult in you a little bit, and keeping up with Kickstarter trends, and you start knowing a lot of designers, and you start backing a lot of Kickstarters.
Yeah.
And somehow, I don't know how it happened, I'm now both, you know, it's like, do you wear it as a badge of pride or an embarrassing thing that you kind of hate to admit that you're a Kickstarter super backer?
You're a super backer.
But
you know the level you have to be at a super backer. So if you're saying you've got 50 games,
I don't know what it is. Maybe they're just all in the mail, just on the way to me right now.
You're just gonna wake up tomorrow morning. You're just gonna have truck kind of back, beep beep beep, bring it up, Joe.
So I've got a bunch, and a lot from like local designers I know and like the support, and the thing is, while they've been designing the game, I've actually played a lot of those games like many times, and so by the time it actually comes in the mail, you know, it's like, oh, I've played this game a lot of times, and sometimes it takes a while before I bust it out again because I've already played it so many times.
Have you played through Mechs vs. Minions then? Have you managed to get all the way through
that? So, if we're talking about Shelf of Shame, that is definitely the featured game.
It's like my water feature in my garden. It's Mechs vs.
Huge,
Minions.
Right?
What's it play like? I don't know.
I bought it on the first print run when they first announced it.
Really?
and it's been sitting on my shelf for a couple of years now. It's this mix of things where like, oh well, it feels like a full experience. I want like the right group, and I think shortly after I bought the game, so I had 4 people in mind.
Yeah.
I bought the game, and then 3 of us had babies. So there's that.
There is that.
So it's next to impossible to assemble that group now.
That's just.
I'm hoping that after we're done with Charterstone, we can get that to the table next.
So you're actually saying you've not played it then, basically?
I have not. No.
It's a delight.
I've heard good things.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I don't think I got in trouble for a while because I kept on mentioning Mechs vs. Minions, and folks said, don't mention Mechs vs. Minions again because people will think you're sponsored by the company that makes it. And I said, I wish. So I mentioned it for a while to see if they'd sponsor me, and they didn't. So I stopped mentioning it because it was getting embarrassing how often I was mentioning it. But in terms of teaching somebody how to play a game, it has got it so right on how it teaches you the basic mechanics and how to play the game. I've not seen a game that does it better.
I think it's because they're a video game company.
Yeah.
And it's funny to see the difference between video games and board games. In video games, you don't have an instruction manual. No one ever reads an instruction manual for a video game.
No.
You could just have a tutorial and it teaches you how to play, but in board games, somehow everyone's expected to read a manual, which is this weird stark contrast between the two.
Yeah, and that's why it works. I mean, that's why it works so well, because you are playing through, and you'll find this out when you play it. And it works well with 2 players. You don't need the 4, Joseph. I'm just saying.
Oh, that's good to know.
Because I played it with my son, and we bust through about 3 or 4 campaigns in an evening, and we got lucky, and we won a lot of campaigns. But playing the whole thing, I'm so jealous because you're gonna have that wonderful kind of, this really works and this is easy to play, and I'm just kind of getting through it, and it's, I'm quite a bit kind of jealous. Either that or you could just hold on to it and wait until its market value kind of increases and then kind of, sell it, because let's face it, you've got a 1.5-year-old, and do you know what I know something? See, kids' shoes as they get older, they're really expensive. I'm just saying, they get really, really expensive. Kids' shoes do. So yeah, kind of bear that in mind. But I mean, in terms of you, so you said you kind of reduced the amount of stuff that you have a chance to play. So would that make you kind of in turn kind of concentrate on? I take it, Fantastic Factories was this prototype game that you kind of kept playing within the group itself.
Yeah, it's interesting as a designer. You actually spend a lot of time, playtesting your own game, but also playtesting a lot of other designers' games. And so actually playing a published game can sometimes be a little bit of a treat.
Yeah.
And it's funny also that I've been experimenting with all these different size boxes for my game. And half the boxes that are showing on top of the shelves are actually all these different sizes and shapes and designs of Fantastic Factories boxes.
Yeah.
And so it looks like I own like a bunch of copies. The only game apparently I look like I play is this Fantastic Factories. So it's just boxes and boxes. Most of them are empty, but it's kind of a little bit of a mess in that sense.
Is that because? I don't know. I got told by, who was I speaking to? I was speaking to One Free Elephant, and they said that one of the bits of feedback that they got about their games that they've released is somebody says, you need to put them in bigger boxes because bigger boxes kind of make people want to pick it up because it is such a bigger box. And they said, their idea was to be sick of being told that, so they put their next game, which they're going to be bringing out, I think it's called Microbrew, in one of those mint tins that you get instead. But I've seen that. I mean, was that a decision? Was that a decision to see, does it fit in the box, or do I want something that's kind of like got a presence instead?
Yeah, so that's interesting, and a lot of what you see in our industry is almost at odds with each other. So if you think about like an indie publisher like me, usually the viable way to get your game to the market is through Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But the kind of long tail and the long-term solution, kind of where you want to be, is in retail stores. And those two goals can sometimes fight with each other, in the sense that, like, it is true, in a retail store, you want a box that's bigger because it conveys value regardless of what's actually in the box.
Yeah. Whereas
in Kickstarter, realistically, people actually like small footprint boxes. And in Kickstarter, you don't have a physical box that you're picking up, so that's less of a selling point. And in fact, it's actually better if you have a smaller box, because then you could ship it for a lot less. And so it's this interesting mix of, like, well, Kickstarter, you want small boxes. For retail, you want big boxes.
Yeah.
And ideally, you can catapult your Kickstarter into retail sales, which means that if you're going to do that, then you probably want a large-ish box from the get-go. So it's kind of an interesting challenge, and a lot of games publishers have carved out a niche where they do small box games, like Tiny Epic, Galaxies, and whatever. Their whole selling point is a tiny box, a big game in a tiny box. And
yeah,
it's great that Kickstarter kind of enables these kind of niches to be carved out by publishers.
Yeah,
where people who are actually looking for small boxes and that don't buy into this whole, like, big box conveys value type thing.
Yeah, and it's obviously there's the cost implications, but you never tell. I mean, one of the things that you never really see in a campaign is this is the potential size of the box. Because there was a game, I've seen they're saying a game called No Honor Among Thieves, and it was almost like a kind of an oblong box. It was quite tall. It wasn't. I was expecting something, your long kind of standard flat, almost kind of square box size, and this thing came in like some kind of oblong box instead. It was quite surprising. It was quite unusual, and it actually enticed me to have a look inside to see kind of what was different than the other kind of Kickstarter stuff that kind of came along. How long did you work on Fantastic Factories before you went, right, okay, this is it, let's go and see what happens with this? And did you, because you've been hanging around with a lot more designers, were you getting a lot of support through them? Did they help you make the decision on when the best time to launch would be?
Yeah, definitely. I'll tell you kind of how the idea evolved to what it is now.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, what are our goals with the game design, and I think our first really reaction to that, once we knew we had a game, that our goal was to kind of just share it with as many people as possible, make a product that people will want to play, get it in as many hands as possible. And initially what we were doing is actually seeking out a publisher, because we figured, as no-name designers or someone with no publishing track record, the best way to get your game into as many people's hands as possible is find a reputable publisher that already has this audience and these connections.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Fantastic Factories has been kind of designed as a kind of a entire experience, in the sense that the graphic design, the design philosophy, both in the simplicity of the mechanics and the graphic design on the cards and the art style, it's all about kind of this approachable, fun, whimsical kind of theme. And as I was talking to publishers, and it's also just a creative endeavor for us. I think a lot of it is this creative outlet for the team, and just in terms of, we wanted to make this game because we wanted to make something, create something that we could kind of, in a way, call our own. And as we were talking to publishers, and as most publishers will do, they had some changes they wanted to make, in terms of how the mechanics, the art style, and all these things. And the more we kind of were talking to publishers, the more we realized that if we signed on with one, that we would probably have some kind of regret in terms of like some kind of compromise we would have to make in terms of, because once publishers sign the game, they kind of have ultimate say over how the game will be, what components are, and all these things. So there's this kind of turning point where we decided, okay, you know what, we're gonna self-publish. That way we can, manufacture a game as we envisioned it, as we kind of believe it should be. And that's not to say that we didn't take any feedback from anyone else. We've been, listening to a lot of the feedback, especially from those publishers as well, because they had a lot of valid concerns in terms of the mechanics and certain other component costs, things like that. And we actually learned a lot of valuable information from them in terms of how to approach the game as a product from a publisher standpoint. Because before then, we were kind of designers. We were thinking, well, let's just design a game. But now we have to think about things like the box size, components, all these things. I'm trying to remember what your original question was.
It's fine. There are no questions, Joseph. There's only chat. So I just find I find the whole kind of journey from where people kind of get to having the original kind of boxes and white pieces of paper and kind of markers and stuff to where they actually have kind of like a full kind of game. Always fascinating, because everybody has like a totally different way that they're kind of dealing with stuff. So was it important? I mean, this sounds like it was important to you to kind of not compromise on the original vision that you had for the game. It sounds like it was really, really important that when people were playing Fantastic Factories, that it was the original game that you had been putting together, and it wasn't a case that the art had been changed, or there was less dice, or there was more dice, or things like that.
And I think part of it is because it's not a purely business transaction for us. Our first project, it's a labor of love. We took about 2.5 years to develop and market and kind of do the art and all these things. And it's, not something we're doing just for to make money. We're there to make the best game we can, and in the way that we think will be the best experience for the players. And I think that a lot of publishers probably have similar goals, but they've always got kind of this bottom line they have to worry about as well. And a certain timeline, a certain amount of, they can't dedicate as much time and care with every game as, my co-designer and I have probably dedicated towards Fantastic Factories.
Yeah.
It's probably not a good way to run a business, but it's a great way to make a game, I think. And for us, it's not something that we're necessarily looking to do like full time. It's something that we do, because we love doing it. And
you've seen, I think the practicalities of building a board game is you don't build a board game, I guess, a board game career on the back of one game, unless even if you're lucky enough to kind of catch the lightning in the bottle, which we see all these people that have got 6-figure kind of Kickstarters, and you're sitting there kind of thinking, oh, actually, they've made enough money to make the game, but they've not made any money to actually be able to say, right, I'm going to quit my work. I've still got bills to pay and stuff like that.
It's funny because people have asked me that question, you're gonna quit your day job or whatever. And I think anyone who's kind of, been in the industry watching Kickstarters and learning about other people's, know that you can't really quit your job off of one game. You have to do this kind of thing over and over again. And especially as a software engineer, right now software engineers are paid pretty well, and I enjoy doing coding and programming, all that stuff. So that's not something that I'm looking to necessarily replace. And so we were talking about how much funding would the game have to be for us to even consider, quitting our day jobs, and it's just an astronomical amount.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of have to have a few good games under your belt, get into retail and all these things.
Yeah.
You look at Jamie Stegmaier, for instance. He's like the pinnacle of what, you know, people want to do in terms of Kickstarter. But, you know, if you look at his company, I believe he's the only full-time person working in his company, and he's still kind of just, I mean, he's had great industry success, but I wouldn't say that he's necessarily like swimming in money either.
No, I don't think he's not going about going dollar bill, y'all.
Yeah.
He's not going to put it.
His company's still very small, you know, just one full-time employee and a few part-time, you know. And it's one of those things that people see these dollar signs and these Kickstarter campaigns, but like you raised like, you know, $100,000 in like 3 weeks. Well, what they don't see is the 2 years of development behind it.
Yeah,
you know, it's not 100,000 in 3 weeks. It's 100,000 in 2 years, which then you split that between 2 years, and you split that between everyone on the team suddenly, and then you have to, of course, actually pay for the manufacturing of the game. Suddenly, no one's really making all that much money at all.
Yeah. And the other side of it is you're forgetting about the probably the 5 or 10 grand that you've put into the game over those 2 years before, and buying art for things and getting your prototypes together and doing all the traveling and going to shows and things like that. I think going back to my question was, have you found kind of knowing and getting to know game designers, did that help with the kind of the Kickstarter campaign? Is there people that have kind of given you help, given you advice as you've made your step towards kind of pressing the button?
Definitely, like 100% or 110% definitely. Like it's impossible pretty much to make a good board game in isolation. You know, you need playtesters, you need other people in the community. What's great is other people have blazed this path before us, you know, like I said, Jamie Stegmaier, James Matthew, all these people have written about the Kickstarter process, specifically about tabletop. There are so many Facebook groups and forums, and Twitter. Twitter is amazing space to connect with other designers, content creators, and it's kind of this really welcoming community of people who are just willing to support each other and kind of signal boost and tell everyone about your game. And you know, it's really quite amazing, especially now on to day 2 of the campaign. I did not think that so many people would show up for the campaign. So we're day 2. We funded in 5 hours. We're now at over 200% funded. And, you know, I looked at our audience, you know, our mailing list size, the amount of followers and on Twitter and likes on Facebook, and like the numbers don't seem to quite make sense. To be honest, I'm like, who are these people? Where are they coming from? And I think a lot of it comes from this network of people that you've connected with, you know, designers, influencers, content creators, that when you've connected with them in a really meaningful way, they're willing to lend their voice to you and talk to their crowd, their network. And it's just kind of this expanding effect of people hearing about the game, and it's really quite amazing. And, you know, that's the thing about, I would say the biggest takeaway about designing a board game was that, you know, you get into it thinking you're making this game for you and your friends. And then the next level is, I'm going to be making this game for all these other people. And then at least for me, what's kind of overtaken that, almost that entire passion, is just being part of this community. You know, I discovered this almost like subculture of like board game designers, board game creators, content, you know, reviewers, all this stuff. And I don't know, it's just amazing to be part of all this, being part of something bigger, and all these people who are just have this positive outlook and positive attitude about everything. I don't know if you've seen the Kickstarter video for my campaign. It's a little different than others. It's kind of this this friend that I kind of met along the way, Christian Kang, his YouTube channel, Take Your Chits.
Yep. Yep, he's the guy that he tweets the same thing every day, which is today is the day I start to work out.
Yep, that's the guy. So like he offered to do the video for us, and we were trying to pay him, but then he just, I don't know, the video he produced was just kind of him like talking glowingly about the game, and it's kind of an honest, heartfelt sort of thing, and he felt very connected to us as part of the community, and he ended up not taking any payment for the video at all.
Wow.
In order for it to be kind of this like pure message, if that makes sense. And I think it kind of like highlights what I think the whole board game community is about, in terms of helping each other out and connecting in different ways. It's back to this kind of difference between board games and video games. Most board games require you to play with other players, and you have to play with them face to face.
Yeah.
So I think that's amazing that it's makes it, I guess, harder for things to go viral and grow as large as, say, the video game industry. But I think the connections you make between people, players, and people you meet at conventions, it just makes those connections that much more impactful, more meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, how did you feel when you press the button and then the numbers are climbing? Because your goal was it's just over $15,000, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And you
That's
said
right.
as you said, you funded within 5 hours. I mean, was it kind of an overwhelming experience? Were you expecting? Did you kind of set in your mind, okay, I've done my calculations. We're doing the kind of the calculations on a daily basis. So if we hit $4,000 in the first day, then that's a good start, because then if there's a natural tail off in the middle, if we're hitting an average of 500, an additional $500 a day, then that means that we're going to fund and we could potentially hit quite a few stretch goals. I mean, how did you feel when like this is just going, it's rocketing, and you're seeing it go ding, 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 because you're almost at 1,000 backers just now. So how what were you like when you was like, it gets to hour 4 and you're like, were you thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to fund?
Well, it's interesting, having spent like 2.5 years like doing this. We definitely had some hopes that people would turn up, and I think that we also didn't want to get our hopes up too much, right?
Yeah.
So we were kind of tempering our expectations. I think internally we kind of had a certain number in mind that we hit that point, we'd be pretty happy, kind of satisfied. We'd feel like we hadn't been wasting the last 2 years of our lives. And then there's kind of this pie in the sky kind of number we're hoping for, and honestly I think it's kind of exceeded all my expectations. And to answer your question about kind of seeing these numbers kind of stream in, it is kind of crazy, because we actually have quite a bit of a checklist. Once we hit the launch button, it wasn't a matter of watching the numbers, because for me, I actually had a huge list of like things I needed to do in terms of like making things are squared away, marketing efforts, little small things that hopefully move the needle. Like we're adding the Kickstarter link to our website, updating our Facebook profile pictures to kind of tell our friends and family that our Kickstarter is live, things like that. And I actually spent the next few hours doing that, responding to the comments, messages, and things like that. And I actually mostly only heard about the funding amount through people telling it to me. They're like, oh wow, you guys are at whatever, and I'm like, oh, that I haven't had a chance to take a look, and it's crazy because now have a little bit of time to take a look, but it's still a matter of catching up with all those messages and figuring out we have a list of stretch goals, but the stretch goal graphic itself is something that I'm working. I figured I would have time to work on during the campaign, but apparently
you gotta change it all now.
I gotta like keep up with it. I'm like, oh, my friend's like, oh, looks like you gotta update the stretch goal graphic again. So just trying to keep up with that. And it's been a whirlwind, but really exciting so far.
What does your wife think of it? I mean, being a non-board gamer, is she just like, oh, what does this mean? Joseph, tell me.
Well,
what does this mean?
She's super supportive because she knows like it's my, like my passion, the thing. She knows that she's also invested a lot of time in this, in the sense that, I'll go off and go to a play testing event and she'll have to watch the kid, and so she's put in, a lot of hours as well in terms of supporting me and allowing me to do the things I need to do in order to get the game off the ground. And it's actually a little cute because she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have a Kickstarter launch day gift for you." I'm like, what is that? I'm like, she felt like she was obligated to like gift me something for the Kickstarter launch day, like it was like a wedding or something, like here's your launch gift, I don't know. Anyways, I told her, you definitely not necessary. Everything you've done so far already has been, amazing, and I just asked for, support and all that stuff. And even during the campaign, there's going to be a lot of kind of marketing efforts. I'm going to be hitting up a lot of local game stores to demo the game and doing things like recording this podcast and just talking with as many people as possible.
It's just, but I mean, you've obviously done the talking and the walking, because if you look at the number of kind of people that have talked about the game, I'm looking at, you got your list. You've got like, you got Brittany Bow, you've got Tony Miller, you got Tantrum House on there. You've got a whole pile of people that seem to have, Christy from, was it Peace Love Games? She's done, they've all done kind of various different things, and they all seem to have very, very kind of positive messages. I mean, was that being from a design point of view and going into the marketing, was that a kind of a baptism of fire, having to then say, well, listen, we need to get the name out here now as well?
Yeah, somehow that transition kind of happened easier than I thought it would. And I think it just depends on the kind of person you might be. But for me, I found that meeting these new people and some of them are very eager to meet you depending on how much history or hype they've heard about your game. And I guess I found it a little addicting. Like, I'm like, especially on Twitter, like this person, and then like you end up following this person and you like all their tweets and whatever, and then you actually get to meet them in person, and it's like, hey, you're that person I've interacted with for all these months.
Yeah,
and I get to finally meet you, and so it's almost, it builds up anticipation, and these people have like heard about my game and like, oh, I've heard so much about your game, let's play it, let's try it, and some people they call it influencer marketing or whatever, and to a certain extent, I do like reach out and try to meet these people, but genuinely, I actually want to meet these people and just like hang out with them and play games, and and it really helps when the two goals kind of align. Like when I'm not just doing it just to like get the game in their hands so they can like market it for me or something like that. It's just kind of this, like I said, it comes back to this community and feeling connected to the board game community, and it's something that I find really rewarding and exciting. And when it comes time for other publishers or creators, designers pushing their projects, I've always been more than happy to support them, both through marketing efforts and backing their projects and whatnot.
Do you know what we've not done? I do this all the time.
We haven't actually talked about the game itself, right?
We've not actually, no. No, I think this is a personal best to get almost almost 50 minutes into a chat and not actually talk about the reason that we should. But look, there's so many other people that have done content that have been talking about your game. They've done videos and stuff like that. But
That's true.
in a nutshell, I'm fascinated by this game, and I'll tell you why. Because there was a game that came out about 3-4 years ago now, called Steampunk Rally, which was where you chuck dice and you use the dice to build an engine which gave you resources which allowed you to race around a track. Love that game. It's a favourite of mine. So when I saw this, it's a dice placement engine building game. Joseph, what's it about? What's the message?
Well, sure. Fantastic Factories, as you mentioned, is a dice placement engine building game. So you're trying to build the most efficient set of factories in order to manufacture as many goods as possible. So you're trying to figure out all these different blueprints, which ones to build. They have these kind of inputs and outputs. Some factories will require certain dice rolls. So you're going to be rolling your dice and using your dice as workers to place in these different factories, and also the starting player board that you have. And different factories require different workers. So one requires like maybe a matching pair or maybe a specific value. And then there's also these training facilities that you can build to train your workers and manipulate your dice rolls. So it's this combination of this discovery of engine building discovery aspect, and also this puzzle solving thing where you are trying to figure out where all your workers go in order to maximize the amount of resources and goods that you're manufacturing.
And it's you can solo play it.
Yeah. So it's a game that is very focused on kind of your own personal tableau and building out your own tableau. And like I said, that puzzle solving aspect. And I think a lot of kind of puzzle solving games lend itself very well to solo play. Yeah. And so it seemed like a very natural thing to add into the game. And it's actually quite nice to go through the solo game to kind of playtest the balance of various cards as well. So in the solo game, you actually play against a very basic AI. And one of the things about like AIs, there's a few different kinds of solo games, right? There's the easiest implementation of a solo game is just kind of beat your score sort of thing, right? What's your high score? And I find those are okay, but they don't feel like you're necessarily playing the game against other players.
Yeah.
So I wanted kind of this sense of like you're competing against someone else, and this kind of tension of like being able to outrace this opponent, but at the same time you don't want the AI to be this massive like decision tree of things that you have to manage in order for the AI to emulate a player. So it's kind of about approximating what a player would do in order to effectively emulate an opponent. And so that's kind of what the AI does here. You actually roll a number of dice, which then you can easily match up the dice. So the green die matches up with a particular action that the AI will take. Through simply picking a card out of the marketplace and building that piece of the engine. And rather than specifically running actual factories, you just kind of group up the factories by their type. And the dice rolls will determine whether the AI will actually manufacture goods or not that turn, based on how much of their engine they've built out in terms of just sheer quantity of cards in that category. So I think it's a really streamlined AI where it approximates kind of the impact of a player in terms of choosing cards out of the marketplace and building up the momentum in this engine.
I mean, was the decision to go down this line, because it looks fantastic. So I mean, I've not seen anything kind of like this. I can't remember the last time I've seen something like this. And I do look at Kickstarter quite a lot. I mean, are you kind of sitting there going, we've got a good game, but we've launched at the right time, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of direct competition at the moment. it seems to you've kind of inspired people to say, well, this looks exciting, this looks different. Do you? I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but do you think people seeing one miniature game after another, there's a little bit of maybe fatigue that when something like your game kind of comes up, it's almost like there's a little bit of freshness. Here's your, you've got normal lemonade, but look, here's lemonade with a little twist of lime in it and a lovely straw kind of thing. And people are like, oh, their little ears are pricking up and they're more kind of excited about it. Do you think that's kind of maybe one of the reasons that it's kind of doing what it's doing just now?
I think it's kind of a mix of things, because if you look at the game from a mechanics standpoint, there's actually not a ton of original aspects to it. It's kind of this mix of different mechanics that you see in other games, but maybe not combined in the same game. And I'm fine with that, because I still think it kind of provides a really fun gameplay experience. I think part of what you're saying is what kind of environment do you see in Kickstarter, and kind of the challenge of how do you stand out. It's interesting because you both want to kind of do best practices, and you also want to stand out from the crowd. And there's a couple things about Kickstarter that are challenging. Is that, yes, you see a lot of these huge minis games, and you also see a lot of these kind of small impulse buy games that are like $9.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually quite challenging for a game that's kind of a medium weight game to exist in a Kickstarter environment, because a lot of Kickstarter is about impulse. It's about the deluxe game. It's about kind of this over the top production value that you can't get in a retail store. And I think for us, it's always been about the gameplay and not so much about the components. And we're trying to kind of weave that narrative, that story of like, we're here to make the best game we can, and not overproduce, not underproduce, just do what we think is best. And hoping a lot of that kind of shows in the sense that we don't have like 20 different pledge levels. We don't have tons of exclusives. Our stretch goals are component only upgrades. All the content that we intend on including in the game is included from the very get-go. I didn't want to be playing games with our Kickstarter backers in terms of like, well, you might get this or you might not, and the reality is maybe we intended on giving it to you from the very beginning, that sort of thing. And the other mix, so that's I think challenging, but also a little different, and I'm hoping that is enough to set us apart from some of the other projects. But the other component is kind of the art, and I think art really can sell your game, especially on Kickstarter, where a lot of what people see is just your campaign page, and they don't actually get to play your game, although they can because there's a print and play. But a lot of people won't go through that effort of trying it, and they'll make their decision based off of kind of their initial impressions, and that's where art can go a long way. And you see a lot of the standard stuff like high fantasy, sci-fi, space kind of games. And from the very get-go, I wanted something a little different, something bright and something colorful, something that matches the kind of elegant and approachable mechanics of the game. And kind of settle, and also like something that would make the theme of factories a little more enticing and more interesting. And so we settle on this kind of whimsical, fantastic color theme where the factories are just bright and cheery, and it's something that you don't see very often. Very
happy. It's a very kind of happy and bright. Do you know what it is? It's like if you had like a kid's character, and it's like, oh, Daddy's away to work. And it's like, and we'd actually follow Daddy for the day, and this is where they'd be working if they were working at the factory kind of thing. I mean, that's one of the things that is very attractive about the game. I see it's not, high fantasy, fantastic, and there's some amazing kind of games out there that have some absolutely fantastic art. But again, when you see something like, say, like, when you see the artwork on Fantastic Factories is striking enough and it's different enough to kind of like it turns your head.
Mm-hmm.
You go, oh well, let's have a little bit of a look for that. If people are looking to back, how much do they have to back in order to be a backer that backs?
So the basic pledge level for one copy is $29 plus shipping, and we're actually subsidizing $6 of the shipping. So shipping to the US is $6.
Mm-hmm.
And then shipping to the UK would be, sorry, let me take a look real quick. I believe $13. I think it's grouped into EU, even though
Yeah.
I guess that may or may not be the case. Anyways, yeah, so $13 $13 shipping to UK. So for the $29 plus shipping.
That's not an awful lot. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, where I guess one of the other things that's attractive to this is you do see a lot of games which are they're hitting the sub $100 and over the $100 for a pledge, and for some people that's just a bit too rich, isn't it? You know, it's it's a really kind of decent kind of price point.
I think one of the things is we always wanted to be able to get the game into as many hands as possible. So we didn't want something that was, cost prohibitive.
No. I mean, and I think, that's reflected in the fact that you're currently sitting at, and you're going to have to sort out your stretch goal graphic because it's you're missing a tick.
Yeah.
The $31,000 one's gone, Mr. Chen. You need to get on that.
That'll be my first task as soon as we're done recording.
But
that and lunch, I guess.
Yeah, that's because it's lunchtime. You're at $35,000. Well, you're almost $36,000. You've got about 29 days, probably about 28, 27 days by the time this goes out. It looks fun. It looks kind of like fantastic, and for the price you're looking for a backer, it definitely looks like you should be taking a kind of a look into it. So if people want to find out, or they've listened along today and they've went, oh, let's find out a little bit more about your good selves, where can they find you on the internet webs, Mr. Chen?
So I think I'm probably most active on Twitter, so you can find me at Fan Factories.
Mm-hmm.
And also on Facebook at Fantastic Factories and Instagram as well. And if you want to check out the campaign, you can always look it up, look up Fantastic Factories on Kickstarter, or go to the website, fantasticfactories.com, and it'll have a link there as well.
Yeah, and you've got some fantastic art on the website as well. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a lot of fun.
I do have one more question for you, though. Okay?
Okay, I have a feeling
you
I might know what it is.
You know you don't, because I've changed it, alright?
Oh, so okay. All right.
No, the result's the same, but I've got to make it up for everybody that comes on and make it tailored to them. It's a bespoke question.
Oh, okay. Not the question I was expecting.
It probably is the question that you're expecting, but I'm trying to make it not look like I'm a tired old hack that just comes out with the same old nonsense again and again and again. You have visited a board game factory. And you rock up to the board game factory and the managing director meets you and grips you strongly by the hand and says, everybody that comes along because Fantastic Factories has done so well and we really want your business, we have the ultimate board game making machine. And the ultimate board game making machine can make any board game at all with any expansions on it. And the managing director looks at you and says, what would you like if you can have, we have enough cardboard and all the designs for every board game going. And all you need to do is to press the button and we will make 3 board games for you, any board games that you want. What 3 board games would you have made for yourself, Mr. Joseph Chen?
So these would be like games that are already out there, published games.
Anything at all, any board games that are out there at all, anything that you've coveted, anything that you've wanted, anything from first editions you can have. It presses the button, it'll automatically include all the expansions as well. What games would you like?
That's a tough one. Well, the first one that comes to mind is that Suitcase Azul. Have you heard about this one?
No.
So like Azul has this. Are you familiar with Azul?
Yeah. This like the ceramic tile kind of laying game. Yeah.
But they were showing off like this huge set that they use for like demos or conventions, and people are like, "Oh my god, I've got to have that. You guys sell that?" And then they're like, "Oh, maybe," and then they decide that they're gonna sell it for $300.
Okay.
At which point people are like, actually, we don't want it.
No, we don't. No, you're fine. So
anyways,
you want that one.
Yeah, I think Azul's a really elegant game. Those tiles are really tactile and very satisfying. I imagine having a large version of it would even be that much more enticing. Okay. So, I like to call it Suitcase Azul.
That's your first game. What's your second one?
Oh man, second. So that's challenging because, like, as I mentioned, like I've never been that much about the components of a game, more about the gameplay, and
it doesn't let you off the hook.
All right. I think I'm sensing a trend here. I'm very enticed by these massive size versions of games. I'm imagining. Actually, I've thought about this, like a massive version of Fantastic Factories, where like the instead of using cards for each of the factories, each card would actually be chipboard, and the dice slots on the cards, since it's not cards, they would actually be inset. And you actually set these massive, like, 30 millimeter dice under these chipboard card factories. Your tableau would probably take up, like, the entirety of a table. So everyone would have to have their own table, I guess.
I'm gonna let you away with that because it is a game. Obviously, your game's funded, so it will be getting made. But don't do it again for the third game. What's your third game, Joseph? And no cop out this time. No going for your own game that's about to get made.
Third one. Let me think. Any edition, any whatever. That's the problem is I don't consider myself a collector in the sense that, I have the need to collect something. But,
Any game at all.
Any game at all.
Any game at all.
I'm trying to think. Oh, sorry. Third game. See, that's the problem when you have a small collection. But I think the game, back to kind of the party game roots, I guess. The massive code names.
Okay.
The giant box of code names. See, that seems to be the trend here. I'm just gonna stick with it. Massive games.
Massive
this
games.
board game,
games.
Magic board game creating machine. I just want massive board games, right? Because these days you can get whatever you can, but the massive ones, those are. Have you seen the massive code names?
I have not. I'm gonna have to take a look at this now and just see what all the kerfuffle is about.
Massive games, yeah. That's how we roll in the US. Bigger is better.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that. I've seen what you do with your bigger is better. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, and you should. Here you go. Self-promotion. Listen to us and like us. Please like us. You can follow us on various different social media as well. We are on Twitter at We're Not Wizards. We're on Facebook at We're Not Wizards. We're on YouTube at We're Not Wizards Tabletop Podcast. You can go to Instagram and you can find us there. You can find us on... We've got our own blog, which is we'renotwizards.blogspot.com, and we have just launched a scathing attack on Sean A. Person from Thing 12 Games and his absolute lie of a game, which is Seals of Cthulhu, which you should probably have a look at Fantastic Factories before you look at Seals of Cthulhu. Because after all, he is a big poo-poo head, as I said on Twitter just today. Not dating this show at all. You can find us on the various podcast catchers. So you can find us on Stitcher and Spreaker and Acast. You can go onto our website, which is we'renotwizards.com. You can email us, magic@we'renotwizards.com. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts. Thank you very much for everybody who's been giving us some ratings and some reviews and some subscriptions, because it is working and Apple has decided we're going to get another 3 days of sunshine. So isn't that fantastic? If you do want to give us a rating or a review, remember, don't give us 10 stars, because as you can hear, I'm getting quite big-headed, but don't give us 1, because that makes us cry, and I'm still very much an ugly crier. But give us 5, because it's in the middle, and it's average, and we're just a little bit average. But the gentleman who has not been average tonight, from Metafactory Games, is the rather wonderful, the rather fantastic Mr. Joseph Z Chen. Thank you very much, sir, for coming on. I really appreciate your time, and I wish you all the best of luck with the rest of the campaign.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun being on the show.
Good. There's only 2 more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Joseph?
No, at least not today.
Good. Well, not any day at all, Joseph. I can still edit this.
Well, I don't know. You never know what the future might hold.
Don't even. If that's your next game, I'm not going to be happy. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Joseph. Say goodbye, Joseph.
All right, goodbye.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe. Roll 6s, maybe roll 3s, maybe roll 2s. It depends on what you need for your factory in order to produce the right goods, or bring in the right workers, and maybe train the right workers, or maybe you want to bring in a worker that allows you to change your dice. But make sure you get the goods out the door, because at the end of the day, points mean prizes and winning. And check out Fantastic Factories, because it doesn't just look like a clever name, it does actually look quite fantastic. But until the next time, goodbye.